Pack the bags, Diggs. That is a line that you will never forget after seeing tonight's movie review. And tonight's review is of It's Love I'm After, and it came out in 1937. We don't review many comedies in this channel, but this is one that I've been wanting to revisit for a long time. I first saw this movie all the way back in, from my notes, 2010, so over 10 years. I recently saw it this past weekend, and I'm extremely happy to finally review it. So this movie stars the great Leslie Howard, Bette Davis. It also has Olivia De Havilland, Patric Knowles, and I will definitely note Eric Blone, who most people probably wouldn't recognize that name, but you have to reference him because he is hilarious in this, along with Leslie Howard's character. So this is a comedy that I would say holds up even today because I was laughing, my dad was laughing. There's a lot of really funny lines in this movie and just funny scenes in general. It was directed by Archie Mayo, and he also directed The Petrified Forest, which is another one of my favorite movies that also has Bette Davis and Leslie Howard in it. However, this was the third of only 3 films they would make together of Human Bondage, Petrified Forest, and then this one being the last. And he also would make other good movies such as Angel on My Shoulder, I'll note that. But yes, Pack the Bags, Diggs. Every time you hear that, take a shot. It's awesome. Anyway, so I'll instantly start talking about the plot. We'll get into it. The opening scene is another one you won't forget because it's, well, first off, I'll say Leslie Howard plays a famous theater actor named Basil Underwood, and Bette Davis is a famous female actress in the theater named Joyce Arden, and they're sort of a duo. I suppose a traveling duo and plays together. Olivia De Havilland plays Marcia, who is just a love-struck young girl, just crazy about Basil Underwood. His character, really, not him, but we'll get to that. And Eric Blone plays Diggs, who is, what would you call him? I guess Basil Underwood's chauffeur or his right-hand man, his butler, not his butler, but he just practices his lines with him. Theater actors had that back in the day. So it starts out with Shakespeare Scene with the end of Romeo and Juliet. And this is another scene I didn't forget. In fact, when it started, I instantly remembered everything. In fact, while I was watching it, I was waiting for Basil to say, or Basil or Joyce's character to say onion breath because that, for some reason, that just stuck with me because they're filming this just so romantic, tragic scene and they keep taking jabs at each other, and you can just tell like there's some friction, like they love each other, but just it's a toxic relationship. And also, this movie is so fun because you get to see Bette Davis in a comedy movie. We see her in so many dramas and tragic films with crazy stories, but we get to see Bette Davis in a fun film, and she really is funny. She's great at it. But it's sort of about their toxic relationship. They have been putting off marriage. They've done it 11 times. They've said, oh, we're engaged, we're going to get married 11 times, and something always happens, usually Basil Underwood in Spanish is what we call a conquistador because he just wants to keep conquering new girls, and he's just interested in all beautiful women, and anytime he sees a new beautiful woman, he's just like taken by her. In fact, it starts with that scene, and then Olivia De Havilland's character, Marcia, she sneaks into his room, his dressing room, and she basically says, I love you. And Olivia De Havilland, she's such a funny actress. She's really in so many other great films. In fact, she was in 4 films with Bette Davis. And in fact, one of them being In This Our Life, which is another film that I would love to review one day because it's a great movie. But she's so funny as just the crazed fan who's just googly-eyed, just obsessed and in love with a movie star. She's so good at that role because all she does is feel love for him, blind love, really. So she meets him. She says, bye-bye, we'll never see you again. But then her fiance is just so annoyed that she's not interested in him that he goes to, and her fiance is Patric Knowles, who I always say he's like the Errol Flynn #2 or the B Errol Flynn. I know he was in a lot of good movies with Warner Brothers, but I mean, he didn't reach star status like Errol Flynn did. But he comes to see Leslie Howard, Basil Underwood, and he says, hey man, you need to come talk some sense into my girl. Make her fall out of love with you. So then this is like the screwball comedy setup where so Leslie Howard, at first he had proposed to Bette Davis, saying, okay, this is it, we're gonna get married, babe, we're gonna finally do it. And then she loses it when he says, oh, I have to just do this one thing, my love, I have to go, you're gonna love me because I'm gonna do something really unselfish for once, because he's really just the most arrogant guy ever. And I will say Leslie Howard was such a natural at playing that cool but arrogant man, and funny. He's charmingly arrogant. He's brilliant at that role. So he says, okay, I'm gonna go make this young girl fall out of love with me, but he doesn't know it's Olivia De Havilland. So he goes to this grand mansion, and I'll note that Diggs comes up with this funny point system with him where he's always like adding and subtracting points and saying, ooh, sir, minus 100 points. And they're always talking about like bad things he's done in the past. There's just so many little funny things in this movie that you won't remember 10 years later like I didn't, but when you're watching it, it's just so funny. And like I said, this comedy holds up even today in 2021. So I'll note also the scene when they show up at this mansion and they're waking everybody up and they're being so obnoxious and so annoying and just acting so snobby, like rich snobs. In fact, the scene when they wake up for breakfast and he's demanding his kipper, and everyone is just like, oh my gosh, what is, and he just walks around the room making snarky remarks about every single person in the room. It's Leslie Howard is so good at it. So I also love the scenes where Diggs and honestly Diggs and Basil, their scenes together steal the whole show. They're so funny together. And the scenes where they're like, this is from this play, and they keep taking little things from each play, and what was that line, remind me, Diggs, and it's so funny. And I'll also note, of course, the garden scene where Diggs is he's using his bird calls to get Basil's attention because he's flirting way too much with Olivia De Havilland's character. They're getting way too close, and he's just spazzing out with all these bird calls. It's hilarious. I'm gonna give this movie a 3.5 stars. I wouldn't put it at a perfect film, but it is so close to being just a perfect comedy in my mind. It's another interesting thing about this movie is the strange connections it has with Gone with the Wind. There's the fact that Olivia De Havilland and Leslie Howard were, of course, lovers in Gone with the Wind. There's the fact that Bette Davis almost became Violet in Gone with the Wind, but instead she would do Jezebel. And then the third thing is that Clark Gable's name is referenced to by Olivia De Havilland later in the film, which is kind of interesting because this wasn't an MGM film. I don't believe so. So kind of interesting they would, point out to someone from a different studio. So interestingly enough, Bette Davis didn't originally want to make this film. She agreed to do it as long as Warner Brothers made this film, as long as Warner Brothers would let her rest for a few weeks, because she was exhausted from making her previous film, and they agreed that she could take a few weeks off, and so she did this film. So I want to read my original review from 11 years ago of It's Love I'm After. Back then I gave this movie a 3.5 stars, so I want to stay true to my original review from years and years ago. So I said, "You can never go wrong with Leslie Howard, especially with Bette Davis," because I've seen their 3 films together and I love them as a pair. "This movie was wonderfully funny. Famous stage actor Basil Underwood and his valet Diggs are hilarious together. Note, pack the bags, Diggs." Olivia De Havilland was a very convincing, crazed fan, madly in love with Howard. Bette Davis was the beautiful girlfriend that I loved cheering for. I've reconsidered. Howard and Davis are better than Brent and Davis, talking about George Brent. But I would later go on, like the next day, to say, because I watched The Great Lie with George Brent and Bette Davis, I went on to say, okay, George Brent and Bette Davis are the ultimate combination. So I have something interesting from this book on Bette Davis about this. She said, this is all I could find that she said about it from several books that I have. She said, "It was a farcical comedy, but Leslie Howard and I had a romp, and I was out of the gutter and in O'Kelly's latest gowns." I guess O'Kelly was a famous designer back then. And I don't exactly know what she means by romp. So if anybody wants to tell me in the comments, I don't know if a romp is a good thing or a bad thing. I have a picture from the movie in this book. You can see Howard and De Havilland. And I have one more picture from another book. Oh, this book is very heavy. You can see right there Leslie Howard and Bette Davis. That's when she's putting a bunch of furniture against the wall. One of these days I'm going to show my books to you all. I have this really interesting collection there's this huge book. It's called The Warner Brothers Story. And then I also have one, the MGM story. And hopefully soon I'll have the RKO story. So one of these days I'd like to make a video sort of showing off my book collection. Anyway, great comedy. You'll laugh. It holds up to today. Watch it once every 10 years like I guess I'm doing. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoy this picture and this review.